In a crowded market town nestled between distant mountains and a winding river, there lived an old man named Ramesh. He owned a small repair shop tucked between a spice stall and a tea vendor. It wasn't much, just a table, a few tools, and a weathered stool. But for over 40 years, he had made a living fixing watches. Watches of every kind passed through his hands, some expensive, some ordinary, some broken beyond repair. But Ramesh treated each one with the same care. He worked slowly, deliberately, always with a quiet patience that puzzled the younger men in the market. They often laughed behind his back. "Why spend an hour fixing something worth less than a cup of tea?" one shopkeeper joked. Ramesh would only smile, eyes never leaving the gears in front of him. Across town, a young man named Arjun had recently opened a mobile store. He was ambitious, fast-talking, always in a rush. In less than a year, he had doubled his profits, hired staff, and plastered his logo on flashy signs. To many, he was the future, quick, sharp, always moving. One afternoon, Arjun's expensive wristwatch stopped working. A gift from his father, it was more sentimental than useful, but even so, he felt irritated. He asked around and someone pointed him toward Ramesh's tiny repair shop. Curious more than hopeful, Arjun stepped inside. The air smelled of oil and old paper. A small fan hummed. Ramesh looked up, nodded, and held out his hand without asking a single question. Arjun hesitated. "It's not worth much," he said. "Just fix it quickly." Ramesh didn't respond. He turned the watch over gently, as if listening to it, and then, without a word, he began. For the first few minutes, Arjun stood impatiently, glancing at his phone, tapping his foot. The shop felt too slow, too quiet. He was used to noise, notifications, meetings, deadlines. But here, time seemed to move differently. Ramesh worked without looking up. He moved with a steady rhythm, examining each piece of the watch like it held a secret. He didn't rush, he didn't explain, he just listened, to the ticks, the gaps, the silence. Finally, Arjun spoke. "You've been doing this a long time?" Ramesh nodded. 42 years. Arjun raised his eyebrows. "You could have made more money selling phones like me." Ramesh smiled gently. "Perhaps, but I wasn't chasing money." Arjun chuckled. "That's easy to say when you're old." Ramesh paused, then looked up, eyes calm. "It's not about age, it's about value. You measure life in rupees, I measure it in minutes." Arjun didn't know what to say. Ramesh continued. "Money comes and goes. You can earn it, lose it, earn it again. But time, once it's gone, it doesn't return. I spend my time on things that slow me down, because when I'm slow, I see more." The words felt strange to Arjun, foreign. He had always been taught that speed was success, that busyness was a badge of honor. But now, standing in this quiet shop, watching this old man bring a dead watch back to life, something in him began to soften. He slipped his phone into his pocket and sat on the extra stool. For the first time in a long while, he just waited. Minutes passed, but Arjun didn't feel the usual itch to check his messages or scan headlines. Something about the shop, the stillness, the quiet ticking of repaired watches on the shelf, was strangely comforting. Ramesh finally looked up and held the now fixed watch in his palm. "It was just one spring out of place," he said. "But the small things always matter most." Arjun took the watch, now alive with motion. The ticking was soft, but steady, reliable. He stared at it, and for a moment he wasn't thinking about deadlines or profit margins. He was thinking about his father, the day he'd given him the watch, the pride in his eyes, the years that had slipped by since. "How much do I owe you?" Arjun asked. Ramesh shook his head. "No charge." "But why?" The old man smiled. "Because today, you paid with something more valuable. You gave time. You listened." As Arjun stepped out into the sunlight, he felt different. Not in a dramatic way, just a little more aware of the sky above him, of the sound of his own breath, of the seconds ticking steadily on his wrist. And maybe, like Arjun, you've spent your days chasing money, success, or speed. Maybe your hours feel like currency you're always running out of. But here's a truth we often forget. You can always earn more money. You can never earn back lost time. This channel isn't just about stories. It's about reminders, gentle, grounding ones. If something in this story made you pause even for a moment, subscribe. Not for numbers or trends, but as a promise to spend more of your time wisely, fully, and meaningfully. because how you spend your time is how you spend your life. Later that week, Arjun found himself waking up earlier, not to get ahead on work, not to check sales reports, but to sit on his small balcony, cup of tea in hand, and watch the town slowly come alive. He didn't know why exactly. All he knew was that since his visit to Ramesh's shop, his sense of time had shifted. He noticed things he used to ignore, the way light pooled on the floor in the morning, the quiet murmur of his neighborhood before traffic began, the first call of the chaiwala at the corner. He started spacing out his meetings more, taking walks in the afternoon, listening, really listening, when someone spoke, instead of planning his next reply. And strangely, his business didn't suffer. In fact, his staff began to work better. With less pressure, their ideas improved. There was more space, more breath. One of his employees asked him, "Boss, are you okay? You seem slower these days." Arjun laughed. "I'm not slower, I'm just not in a hurry." He began keeping a journal, not filled with strategies or targets, but with reflections. Thoughts like, "I traded 5 minutes of worry for 5 minutes of stillness today, and I feel lighter." Or, "I spent 20 minutes with my mother this morning, best investment I've made all week." He understood now what Ramesh meant by measuring life in minutes. The realization wasn't loud, it was quiet and lasting. Time, he realized, wasn't something to fill, it was something to feel. A few months later, Arjun walked past Ramesh's shop again. The sign hadn't changed. The stool was still in the same place, but something inside him tugged, so he stepped in. Ramesh looked up from his work and smiled, as if expecting him. "I still wear the watch," Arjun said, lifting his wrist. "I can hear it from here," Ramesh replied with a chuckle. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft click of tools and the slow breath of time moving as it always had, unbothered, unhurried. "I used to think every minute I wasn't working was wasted," Arjun admitted. "Now I think some of my best work happens when I'm not doing anything at all." Ramesh nodded. "That's the secret. Time isn't just a measure. It's a mirror. How you spend it reflects who you are becoming." Arjun looked at the old man, truly seeing him this time, not just as someone behind a cluttered workbench, but as a keeper of wisdom that couldn't be rushed. And he realized something else. He had more money now than ever before, but the wealth he valued most wasn't in his bank account. It was in his mornings, his stillness, the relationships he had begun to repair, the clarity he had found in pauses. The truth was simple, yet life-changing. You can earn back money, but time only moves forward. And if you don't learn how to be present with it, you'll look back and realize you were never really here. One rainy evening, Arjun found himself standing by his window, watching drops of water streak down the glass. The market was quieter now, shops closing, lights flickering off one by one. His phone buzzed beside him, emails, updates, numbers. But for once, he didn't feel the urge to answer. He just stood there, breathing in the moment. He thought about how much had changed, not in his surroundings, but in his rhythm. He had learned to say no, to pause, to savor, to measure success not in speed, but in presence. His days still held challenges, of course, deadlines, demands, decisions, but they no longer ruled him. They flowed around him like water around stone, because now he understood the value of what couldn't be bought, sold, or scheduled. He opened his drawer and pulled out the watch Ramesh had repaired. It ticked softly, the same as before, but it no longer told just time. It told a story, his story, of what happens when a man stops racing and starts listening, when he stops counting and starts living. And now, as this story ends, I'll leave you with one question. If you could buy back just one lost hour from your past, what would you do with it, now that you know what it's worth?